The entire sanctuary fell silent the moment Sister Violet Bennett stepped forward during evening mass, her trembling voice cutting through the hushed air like a blade. "I need to confess something," she whispered, and 200 pairs of eyes locked onto her tear-streaked face. Mother Superior Evelyn's hand flew to her chest. Sister Cecilia gasped audibly from the front pew, and in the back corner, hidden in shadows where he had no right to be, Nicholas Romano, the man who controlled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist, stood frozen, his jaw clenched, knowing that the next words out of Violet's mouth would either destroy them both or expose a truth far more dangerous than their forbidden love. What nobody in that church understood yet was that the real secret wasn't their forbidden relationship. It was that the man everyone trusted most was the same man who had destroyed Nicholas's life from the very beginning. But to understand how a devoted nun and Chicago's most feared criminal arrived at that moment of reckoning, you need to go back 3 months, to the October night when Nicholas Romano walked into St. Catherine's Church, covered in rain and something that looked suspiciously like blood. Violet had been arranging fresh lilies near the altar when she heard the heavy wooden doors slam open. It was nearly 9 o'clock, well past visiting hours, and the sudden intrusion made her spin around, her heart hammering. The man standing in the doorway was soaking wet, his expensive charcoal suit clinging to a powerful frame. Water, or something darker, dripped from his dark hair onto the polished floor. She recognized him immediately. Everyone in Chicago knew Nicholas Romano's face. He was on the news every other week, always walking out of courtrooms with charges mysteriously dropped, always surrounded by lawyers who cost more than most people earned in a year. The Romano family controlled the South Side, half the docks, and more politicians than anyone cared to admit. "We're closed," Violet said, forcing her voice to remain steady even as every instinct screamed at her to run. His eyes, dark, haunted, dangerous, swept the empty church before landing on her. "Good," Nicholas said roughly. "I need to be somewhere nobody will look for me." "This is a house of God, not a hiding place for—" Violet stopped herself, but the implication hung in the air between them. "For criminals?" Nicholas finished, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "I know what I am." Nicholas moved further into the church, and in the candlelight, Violet saw the split knuckles, the blood on his collar that definitely wasn't his own. But even criminals need sanctuary sometimes. She should have called the police, should have run, should have done anything except what she did next, which was step closer, her nursing training overriding her fear. "You're hurt." "Not me," Nicholas said darkly. "The other guy won't be hurting anyone ever again." The casual admission of violence should have terrified her. Instead, Violet found herself studying his face, seeing past the dangerous reputation to the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried like armor. "There's a first aid kit in the back," she heard herself say. "You should at least clean those hands." Nicholas stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "You're not afraid of me." "I'm terrified," Violet admitted honestly, "but I'm also a servant of God, and that means seeing the humanity in everyone, even you, Mr. Romano." Something shifted in his expression, surprise maybe, or the faint stirring of something he'd buried years ago. "Nicholas," he said quietly, "if you're going to patch up a monster, you should at least know his name." "You're not a monster," Violet said, though her voice wavered slightly. "Monsters don't seek sanctuary. They don't look haunted by their own actions." "You have no idea what I've done," Nicholas said, his voice dropping to something raw and painful. "The things I've had to do to survive, to protect what's mine. If you knew, then tell me," Violet challenged, surprising herself. "If you need sanctuary, truly need it, then talk to Father Murphy tomorrow, or—" she hesitated, "or talk to me now." Nicholas laughed, but it was a broken sound. "Why would a nun waste her time on someone like me?" "Because redemption isn't about deserving it," Violet said softly. "It's about choosing it. And you came here for a reason, Nicholas. Maybe not the reason you think." He left 20 minutes later, his hands bandaged, his expression unreadable. But as he disappeared into the rainy Chicago night, Violet stood alone in the empty church and realized with dawning horror that she'd just invited the devil himself to confession. She had no idea how right she was, or how wrong. Nicholas didn't return for 2 weeks, and Violet told herself she was relieved. She threw herself into her work at the church's food distribution program, serving meals to the homeless, organizing donations, anything to stop thinking about dark eyes and dangerous hands, and the way her heart had raced when he'd looked at her like she was something precious. Then, on a Friday afternoon, he walked into the soup kitchen carrying a briefcase instead of a gun. The entire room went silent. Volunteers froze mid-motion. Several people receiving meals quietly slipped toward the exits. Even Sister Cecilia grabbed Violet's arm in warning. "Mr. Romano," Father Murphy said, his voice carefully neutral as he approached. "This is unexpected." "I'm making a donation," Nicholas said, his tone all business as he handed over an envelope. $100,000 for your community programs. Father Murphy's eyes widened as he opened the envelope. "This is extraordinarily generous, but I have to ask—" "No strings," Nicholas cut him off, but his eyes were searching the room until they found Violet. "Consider it penance." "We don't turn away charitable donations," Father Murphy said carefully, "but Mr. Romano, you should know that money doesn't buy redemption." "I'm not trying to buy anything, Father," Nicholas replied, still looking at Violet. "Someone recently told me that redemption is about choices. I'm trying to make better ones." After Father Murphy walked away, Nicholas approached Violet slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt. "You're angry," he observed. "I'm confused," Violet corrected, keeping her voice low. "You don't get to walk in here with blood money and think—" "It's not blood money," Nicholas interrupted, his voice hard. "It's legitimate income from my family's construction businesses. But you're right to be suspicious. Everything the Romanos touch eventually turns dirty." He paused, studying her face. "You've been researching me." "Of course I have," Violet shot back. "You think I'd just forget about the criminal who showed up bleeding in my church?" "Did you find what you were looking for?" Nicholas asked, and there was something vulnerable beneath the dangerous exterior. "Proof that I'm exactly what everyone says I am?" Violet thought about the articles she'd read, the murders connected to his family, the businesses that operated in legal gray areas, the witnesses who mysteriously recanted testimony. But she also thought about the man who'd sought sanctuary, who'd looked haunted rather than proud of whatever violence he'd committed. "I found a lot of accusations," she said carefully, "very few convictions." "That's because I'm good at what I do," Nicholas said bluntly, "but being good at surviving in my world means doing things that would make you sick, sister. I'm not here to lie about that." "Then why are you here?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to acknowledge. Nicholas's jaw tightened. "Because in 35 years, nobody has ever looked at me the way you did that night, like I was worth saving, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about whether you might be right." Before Violet could respond, Douglas Reed swept into the soup kitchen with his usual fanfare, expensive suit, warm handshakes, the charitable benefactor everyone adored. "Nicholas Romano," Douglas said warmly, extending his hand, "I heard about your generous donation. Perhaps we should discuss expanding the church's community outreach together?" Nicholas shook his hand, but Violet saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he assessed Douglas like a potential threat. "Perhaps," Nicholas said commendacimity. After Douglas moved on to greet other volunteers, Nicholas leaned closer to Violet. "Be careful around him," he murmured. "Douglas? He's one of our most faithful supporters." "He's a businessman who sees charity as networking," Nicholas said darkly. "Hell, I used to be his type before I realized that some things matter more than profit." "Like what?" Violet asked, searching his face. Nicholas looked at her for a long moment, his expression unguarded in a way that made her breath catch. Like maybe finding one person in this God-forsaken city who believes you're capable of being better than your worst moments. Then he left, and Violet stood frozen in the middle of the soup kitchen, her heart pounding, wondering what she'd just stepped into. Sister Cecilia appeared at her elbow. "Vi, you need to stay away from him." "I know," Violet whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it was already too late. Over the next month, Nicholas became a regular presence at St. Catherine's. He funded a new shelter. He hired contractors to repair the church's aging infrastructure. He showed up at community events and charity dinners, always professional, always generous, always watching Violet from across a crowd of gurus. But there was something else happening too, something darker that Violet only caught glimpses of. Phone calls Nicholas would take outside, his expression hardening. Hushed arguments with a man who looked like an older, crueler version of him. The way Nicholas's jaw would clench whenever that man's name came up. Nathan Romano, his older brother, the real power behind the Romano Empire. "My brother thinks I'm going soft," Nicholas told her one evening after a community meeting. They were standing in the church garden, technically in public, but somehow feeling isolated from the world. "He says caring about anything makes you weak." "What do you think?" Violet asked. "I think he's wrong," Nicholas said quietly, "but I also think he's dangerous when he feels threatened, and right now he sees you as a threat." "Me?" Violet's voice rose in surprise. "I'm just a nun who makes me want to be better," Nicholas interrupted. "Who makes me question everything I've built my life on. Nathan's not stupid, Violet. He sees the way I look at you, and he knows that if I keep changing, if I keep trying to leave the family business behind." He trailed off, his expression dark with implications he didn't want to voice. "What would he do?" Violet asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "Whatever it takes to protect the Romano Empire," Nicholas said grimly, "including eliminating what he sees as the source of my distraction." The threat hung between them, heavy and terrifying, but somehow it only made Violet more determined. "Then we need to be careful," she said firmly, "but I'm not walking away from you, Nicholas, not because of your brother's threats." "You should," Nicholas said, his voice rough with emotion. "You should run as far from me as possible." "But I won't," Violet said, and watched something break and rebuild simultaneously in his expression. They didn't speak much during those weeks, didn't need to. Every time their eyes met, every time he held a door for her or she thanked him for another donation, the tension between them grew thicker, more dangerous. Mother Superior Evelyn noticed. "You're playing a dangerous game, child," she warned one evening after Vespers. "Nicholas Romano is not a man who can be saved by good intentions." "I'm not trying to save him," Violet protested, but the lie felt heavy on her tongue. "Then what are you doing?" Mother Superior asked gently. "Because I've watched you for 5 years, Violet. I've seen your dedication, your faith, your calling, and now I see you looking at a man who represents everything you vowed to turn away from." "He's changing," Violet insisted. "His donations have helped hundreds of people. He's trying to impress you," Mother Superior finished, "and it's working. But what happens when the trying stops, when the reality of who he is collides with who you need him to be?" Violet had no answer, but that night, alone in her small room, she prayed harder than she'd prayed in years, not for strength to resist Nicholas, but for wisdom to understand why God had put him in her path at all. The answer came a week later, in the worst possible way. Violet was walking back to the convent alone after an evening ministry meeting when she noticed the black sedan following her. Her pulse spiked, but she told herself she was being paranoid, until the car stopped and 3 men stepped out, their intentions written in every line of their bodies. "Nicholas Romano's little church mouse," one of them said, his voice thick with malice. Nathan Romano wants to send his brother a message about keeping his attention where it belongs." Terror locked Violet's limbs. She tried to scream, but one of them was already reaching for her. Then Nicholas was there, appearing from the darkness like an avenging angel, and Violet watched in horror and awe as the most feared man in Chicago became the most terrifying. He moved with brutal efficiency, every punch calculated for maximum damage, every movement designed to hurt. There was no hesitation, no mercy. This was the Nicholas Romano from the news, the one who'd built an empire on violence and fear. The fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. When it was over, all three men were on the ground, unconscious or wishing they were, and Nicholas stood over them breathing hard, his knuckles split open again, his eyes still burning with rage. Then he turned to Violet, and everything changed. "Did they touch you?" he demanded, his voice raw. "Violet, did they—" "No," she whispered, shaking violently. "You stopped them. Nicholas, how did you—" "I've had men watching you for weeks," he said, pulling her away from the scene before anyone could see them together. "I knew Nathan would eventually make a move. I should have protected you better. I should have—" His voice cracked. "If they'd hurt you because of me—" "But they didn't," Violet said, and without thinking, she reached up to touch his face, her fingers trembling against his jaw. "You saved me." Nicholas caught her hand, holding it against his cheek like it was the only thing anchoring him to sanity. "I've killed people," he said quietly. "Not tonight, they'll live, but in the past. I've made decisions that haunt me. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. My hands are stained, Violet, and they always will be." "Then let me help you wash them clean," Violet whispered, and watched his expression shatter. "You can't save me from what I've already done," Nicholas said roughly. "But God help me, when you look at me like that, I almost believe I'm worth saving." They stood there in the darkness, hands clasped, both knowing they were crossing a line that should never be crossed. Neither of them could step back. "My brother will come after you again," Nicholas finally said, "and next time I might not be here fast enough. You need to leave Chicago, Violet. Go somewhere safe where my family can't find you." "I'm not leaving," Violet said firmly. "This is my home. These people need me." "I need you alive," Nicholas said, his voice fierce. "I need you safe. I need—" He stopped himself, but they both knew what he'd been about to say. Violet made a decision that would change everything. "Meet me tomorrow night," she said quietly. "The church garden, after everyone else has gone. We need to talk about this. Really talk." Nicholas should have said no, should have walked away and never looked back. Instead, he nodded, and they both damned themselves with that single gesture. The next night, Violet waited in the church garden, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. She'd spent all day praying, wrestling with her vows, trying to convince herself this was just ministry, just helping a troubled man find redemption. But when Nicholas appeared in the moonlight, still wearing his suit from whatever violent business had occupied his day, she knew she'd been lying to herself. "I shouldn't be here," Nicholas said, but he didn't leave. "Violet, if anyone finds out—" "Tell me about your brother," Violet interrupted, needing to understand the danger before she could navigate it. "Why does he want to hurt me?" Nicholas sank onto a stone bench, and for the first time she saw him look tired rather than dangerous. "Nathan believes emotions are weaknesses. When our father was killed, murdered by a rival family because he showed mercy once, Nathan decided love makes you vulnerable. He thinks my attention to you is making me careless." "Is he right?" Violet asked softly, sitting beside him. "Yes," Nicholas admitted. "I've been distracted, made decisions based on keeping you safe instead of strategic advantage. Nathan's been threatening me for weeks, says if I don't end whatever this is, he'll end it for me. He's already got people watching us. He knows we're here right now." Nicholas's jaw clenched. "And he's not bluffing, Violet. Nathan doesn't bluff." "What does he want you to do?" "Stay away from you. Focus on the business. Stop pretending I can be anything other than what our father raised me to be." Nicholas looked at her, his eyes tortured. "And if I don't comply, he'll make sure you disappear, permanently." The threat should have terrified her. Instead, it made something fierce rise up in Violet's chest. "Let him try," she said, surprising herself with the vehemence. "I'm not afraid of your brother, Nicholas." "You should be," Nicholas said urgently. "Nathan's killed people for less than what he sees as betrayal, and in his mind, you're betraying everything the Romano family stands for just by existing in my life." "Then maybe," Violet said carefully, "it's time to stop living by your brother's rules. Maybe it's time to choose a different path entirely." Nicholas stared at her like she'd suggested they fly to the moon. "You have no idea what you're asking. Leaving the family business means making enemies of everyone I've ever known. It means Nathan will come after me with everything he has. It means—" "Freedom," Violet finished softly. "It means finally being able to choose who you want to be instead of who you were forced to become." "I'd be dead within a month," Nicholas said flatly. "Or," Violet countered, "you'd finally be alive for the first time in your life." Nicholas looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You really believe I could walk away? Just leave it all behind?" "I believe," Violet said, "that redemption is always possible, even for you, especially for you." She took a shaky breath. "But I also need you to understand something, Nicholas. I can't keep doing this, meeting in secret, pretending what I feel doesn't exist. My vows mean something to me. My faith means something. And if we're going to continue, whatever this is, I need honesty, complete honesty, no more secrets." "Violet, tell me," she pressed, her voice trembling. "Tell me why you really came to the church that first night. Tell me what you're running from. Tell me everything, or I walk away right now and we never speak again." Nicholas closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I came to the church that night because I'd just executed a man, Douglas Reed's business partner, the one who'd been trying to muscle in on Romano territory. I pulled the trigger, Violet, and afterward I realized I'd become exactly what I always swore I'd never be, my father's son." Violet's breath caught, but she didn't pull away. "Douglas hired you? Douglas Reed?" "Your generous benefactor is one of the most corrupt men in Chicago," Nicholas said bitterly. "He uses the church as a cover, makes himself look charitable while building an empire on manipulation and violence. I know because for years I helped him do it." He looked at her, his expression raw. "I came to St. Catherine's seeking absolution for a murder ordered by a man you all trust. And then I met you, and suddenly I wanted to be someone who deserved your faith instead of someone who destroyed it." Violet sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation. Douglas Reed, the man who donated more money than anyone, who'd been honored by the church, who everyone believed was a pillar of the community, was a criminal, worse than Nicholas in some ways, because he hid behind respectability. "Does he know?" Violet asked, "about us?" "He suspects," Nicholas said grimly, "and Nathan's been feeding him information, hoping to create a situation that destroys us both. They're working together now, Violet, my brother and your benefactor, both determined to end whatever this is between us." "Then we need to expose them," Violet said, her voice growing stronger. "We need to tell everyone the truth about Douglas, about what he's really—" "With what proof?" Nicholas interrupted. "I'm a known criminal. You're a nun he's been generously supporting for years. Who do you think the church will believe?" "Then we find proof," Violet insisted. "There has to be evidence, financial records, communications, something that proves—" Nicholas grabbed her shoulders gently but firmly. "Violet, listen to me. If we go after Douglas, if we try to expose him, we'll be starting a war, and in that war, you'll be the primary target. I can't—" His voice broke. "I can't watch you get hurt because of me." "Then don't watch," Violet said fiercely. "Stand beside me instead. Fight with me, not for me. Trust that I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes." Logan looked at her like she was the most terrifying and beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "I fell in love with you the first night," he confessed, "when you offered to help a bleeding stranger without asking why he was bleeding. I've been trying to fight it ever since, trying to protect you from the disaster that is my life. But I'm selfish, Violet. I'm so goddamn selfish because I can't stay away from you." "Then don't," Violet whispered, and closed the distance between them. Their foreheads touched, breath mingling, both knowing that kissing would cross a line neither could uncross. The restraint was torture and salvation all at once. "What do we do?" Violet finally whispered. "I don't know," Nicholas said hoarsely, "but I know I can't lose you, and I know my brother and Douglas Reed are both closing in. We're running out of time, Violet." What neither of them realized was that someone had been watching from the shadows, camera in hand, documenting their forbidden connection. By morning, everything would change. Logan Pierce reviewed the photographs with growing unease. He'd been hired by Douglas Reed to investigate Nicholas Romano's charitable activities, supposedly to ensure the donations were legitimate, but the photos he'd just taken told a completely different story. A nun and a mob boss, clearly in love, meeting in secret. It was explosive, career-making, the kind of scandal that would dominate headlines for weeks. It was also, Logan suspected, exactly what Douglas Reed wanted him to find. He'd been investigating long enough to recognize a setup: the overly generous payment, the insistence on photographing any unusual behavior, the way Douglas had specifically mentioned Sister Violet when describing the church's operations. This wasn't about exposing corruption, it was about destroying two people. Logan made a decision. Instead of sending the photos to Douglas immediately, he started digging into the benefactor himself. What he found made him physically ill. Douglas Reed had been systematically buying property around St. Catherine's for the past 2 years, waiting for the right moment to force the church to sell. He'd tried bribes, pressure, legal maneuvering. Nothing worked. So he'd shifted strategies: destroy the church's reputation from the inside by creating an unforgivable scandal. But it went deeper than that. Logan found financial connections between Douglas and Nathan Romano, found evidence of murders ordered, witnesses silenced, an entire network of corruption that made Nicholas's criminal activities look amateurish by comparison. And he found something else, something that would change everything if it was true. Logan sat in his apartment, staring at a photograph from 28 years ago, and realized he'd stumbled onto a secret that could either save or destroy everyone involved. He called Nicholas directly. "We need to meet," Logan said. "You have a serious problem. Multiple problems, actually, and one of them is sitting in a photograph I found in Douglas Reed's old business files, a photograph you're going to want to see." Nicholas met Logan in a parking garage at midnight, every instinct screaming that this was a trap, but Logan's urgency had been genuine, and the mention of a photograph had triggered something in Nicholas's memory, something his father had once said about Reed, about old connections, about secrets that needed to stay buried. "Keep scrolling," Logan said quietly. The next photo showed the same woman, Nicholas's mother, but this time she was holding a baby, a newborn, and standing beside her, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture that was far too familiar, was Douglas Reed. Nicholas's hands started shaking. "What is this?" "I think," Logan said carefully, "Douglas Reed is your biological father, and I think your mother's death wasn't the accident everyone believed it was." The parking garage seemed to close in around Nicholas. His mother had died in a car crash when he was 7, a tragic accident that his father never talked about, that left the Romano patriarch cold and bitter, that had shaped Nicholas's entire childhood. Except it wasn't an accident, not if Douglas Reed was involved. My father, the man who raised me, he would have known. He would have... I think he did know, and I think that's why he raised you as his own despite the DNA, because he loved your mother enough to accept you. But I also think Douglas Reed has known all along who you really are, and I think he's been manipulating your life ever since. Nicholas thought about all the jobs his family had done for Reed over the years, all the times Reed had specifically requested Nicholas for sensitive operations, the way Reed had watched him, studied him, commented on how much he'd grown, how capable he'd become. He's been cultivating his son, Nicholas realized with dawning horror, turning me into exactly what he needed, a killer with Romano connections and Reed blood, a perfect weapon.
And now that you're trying to change, Logan said, now that Sister Violet is making you question everything, Reed sees you as a threat instead of an asset. He's working with Nathan to eliminate the problem, which is why he hired me to document your relationship. He's planning to expose you both at the annual charity gala in 3 days. Nicholas looked at the photographs again, his mother's face, young and happy in a way he barely remembered, Douglas Reed's possessive hand on her shoulder, the baby that would grow up to be a criminal, never knowing his real father was the corrupt businessman who'd ordered his executions. "Does Violet know?" Nicholas asked quietly. "Not unless you've told her," replied Logan. "But Mr. Romano, Nicholas, you need to understand something. If Reed exposes your relationship at the gala, he'll destroy Sister Violet completely. And then, once she's been publicly humiliated and you're isolated, I think he's planning to kill you, eliminate his son before the truth about your parentage can ever come to light." "He wants me dead," Nicholas said flatly, the pieces falling into place. "And he wants Violet destroyed first, so I'm vulnerable, so I..." He stopped, a new horror dawning. The attack on Violet, my brother's men. What if it wasn't Nathan acting alone? What if Reed told him to do it? "I think Douglas Reed has been pulling strings on both sides, using Nathan's fear that you're going soft, using your love for Violet against you, engineering a situation where you're destroyed and he maintains his perfect reputation as the generous benefactor." Nicholas stood there in the parking garage, staring at a photograph of the mother he barely remembered and the father he'd never known, and felt something cold and hard crystallize in his chest. "Then we destroy him first," Nicholas said quietly. "We expose everything, the murders, the corruption, the manipulation, and we do it at the gala, in front of everyone, before he can strike." "That's suicide," Logan said bluntly. "Reed has connections everywhere, the church, the police, the city government. If you go after him publicly without ironclad proof, he'll bury you." "Then we get proof. You're an investigative journalist. Tell me what you need and I'll get it. Financial records, recorded conversations, witnesses, whatever it takes." Logan studied him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this? You could just leave town, take Sister Violet with you, disappear somewhere Reed and your brother can't find you." "Because," Nicholas said, looking at his mother's photograph one last time, "I'm tired of running from the truth, and I'm tired of being the weapon in someone else's war. It's time to end this, all of it, even if it costs me everything." "It will cost you everything. Your freedom, possibly your life, and Sister Violet, if she stands beside you when all this comes out. I'll tell her she needs to walk away. I'll make her understand that loving me isn't worth this price." But even as he said it, Nicholas knew Violet wouldn't listen. She'd made her choice the night she first offered him sanctuary, and when the truth came out at the charity gala in 3 days, they'd either survive it together or be destroyed side by side. Violet knew something was wrong the moment Nicholas walked into her office at the community center. It was late evening, the building empty except for them, and his expression was harder than she'd ever seen it. "We need to end this," Nicholas said, without preamble, and Violet felt her heart stop. "Whatever this is between us, it's over." "What?" The word came out barely above a whisper. "Nicholas, what happened?" "Reality happened," he said harshly, but she could see the pain he was trying to hide. "Douglas Reed is planning to expose our relationship at the charity gala. He has photographs, evidence, everything he needs to destroy your reputation and turn you into a scandal. I can't let that happen." "So you're just walking away?" Violet's voice broke. "Giving up?" "I'm protecting you," Nicholas said firmly. "Reed wants to use you to hurt me, and the only way to stop that is to end this before the gala. If we're not together, if there's nothing between us, then there's nothing to expose." "That's a lie, and you know it," Violet said, standing and moving toward him despite the warning in his eyes. "Nicholas, whatever Douglas is planning, we face it together. You don't get to make this decision alone." "Violet, you don't understand." "Then explain it to me. Stop trying to protect me by pushing me away and tell me the truth, all of it." Nicholas looked at her for a long moment, and Violet watched the walls he'd built around himself crack and crumble. "Douglas Reed is my biological father," he said quietly, and watched shock ripple across her face. "My mother had an affair with him. The man who raised me wasn't my biological parent, and Reed has known all along. He's been manipulating my entire life, using me for his own purposes, and now that I'm trying to change, he wants me dead." Violet sank back into her chair, processing the revelation. "Does your brother know?" "I don't think so, but it doesn't matter. Reed's planning to expose us both, destroy your reputation, isolate me, and then eliminate me before anyone discovers the truth about my parentage. And I won't. I can't let you be collateral damage in his war." "So your plan is to push me away, face him alone, and probably die in the process?" Violet's voice was fierce, despite the tears streaming down her face. "That's not protection, Nicholas. That's cowardice." The word hit him like a physical blow. "I'm trying to save you." "I don't want to be saved," Violet said, standing again and closing the distance between them. "I want to fight beside you. I want to face whatever comes together, and I want to expose Douglas Reed for what he really is, not just for your sake, but for everyone he's ever manipulated and destroyed." Nicholas grabbed her shoulders, his expression tortured. "You'll lose everything, your position in the church, your reputation, possibly your freedom if Reed's lawyers twist the narrative enough. I've already lost my soul, Violet. I can't watch you lose yours." "My soul isn't lost. It's finally found. And it found you for a reason, Nicholas. Maybe this is why God put us in each other's paths, not despite the danger, but because of it. Maybe we're supposed to stop Reed together." "Or maybe," Nicholas said roughly, "God put you in my path to show me what I can never have, to remind me that some people deserve salvation and some people only deserve damnation." "Stop it," Violet said, her hands coming up to frame his face. "Stop punishing yourself for things you can't change. What Reed did to your mother, what your brother made you become, all the choices you were forced to make, none of that defines who you are now. You get to choose, Nicholas, and I'm choosing you, all of you, even the broken parts." Nicholas closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were wet with unshed tears. "I love you," he said hoarsely. "God help me, I love you so much it terrifies me, but loving you means protecting you, even from myself." "Loving me means trusting me," corrected Violet, "trusting that I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes, trusting that we're better together than apart." She took a shaky breath. "The gala is in 3 days. We have 3 days to gather evidence, build a case, and destroy Douglas Reed before he destroys us. Will you let me help you, or are you going to push me away and face this alone?" Nicholas looked at her, this woman who'd somehow seen past every terrible thing he'd done, every reason she should run, every logical argument against loving him, and made a choice that would seal both their fates. "Together," he said quietly, "but if things go wrong at the gala, if Reed's plan succeeds, you need to promise me you'll walk away. Let me take the fall. Save yourself." "No," Violet said simply. "If we're doing this together, we see it through to the end, whatever that end looks like." They stood there, foreheads pressed together, both knowing they were about to walk into a firestorm that could consume them both. But for the first time since this impossible love story began, they were facing it side by side instead of trying to protect each other through separation. "3 days," Nicholas murmured. "We have 3 days to change everything." "Then we'd better get started," Violet said, and pulled him into a kiss that tasted like desperation and determination and the absolute certainty that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds were impossible. The charity gala was held in the grand ballroom of Chicago's most prestigious hotel. Violet attended wearing a simple dress, no longer in her habit, having requested a temporary leave from her formal duties, ostensibly for personal reflection. The request had raised eyebrows, but Mother Superior Evelyn had granted it with a knowing look that suggested she understood more than Violet had said. Now, standing in a ballroom full of Chicago's elite, Violet felt exposed without her habit's protection, but she also felt free in a way she'd never experienced before, free to make choices that weren't dictated by vows she'd taken at 22 before she'd understood what love could feel like. Nicholas stood across the room, devastatingly handsome in a tailored suit, surrounded by business associates and politicians. To everyone else, he looked calm, confident, in control. But Violet could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes constantly scanned for threats, the barely concealed fury at what was about to unfold. Douglas Reed took the stage right on schedule, his smile warm and trustworthy, the perfect benefactor preparing to make his announcement. "Good evening, everyone," Douglas began. "Tonight we're here to celebrate St. Catherine's wonderful community work. But I feel compelled to address something that has recently come to my attention, something that threatens everything this church stands for." Violet's hands went numb. This was it, the moment that would either destroy them or set them free. "Ladies and gentlemen," Douglas continued, "I've recently discovered that Sister Violet Bennett," he paused, looking directly at her with false sympathy, "or perhaps I should say former Sister Violet Bennett, has been conducting a secret, inappropriate relationship with Nicholas Romano. I have photographs, evidence of multiple clandestine meetings that betray her sacred vows." The ballroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Violet felt every eye turn toward her, felt the judgment, the shock, the scandal. The screen behind Douglas lit up with photographs, her and Nicholas in the garden, their obvious intimacy impossible to deny. But before Douglas could deliver his killing blow, Nicholas stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You're right, Douglas," he said clearly. "Violet and I have been meeting. We have developed feelings for each other. But what you haven't told this audience is why you care so much about exposing us." "Mr. Romano," Douglas said smoothly, "I'm simply concerned about the integrity of—" "You're concerned about control," Nicholas interrupted, moving toward the stage with predatory grace, "about eliminating a threat before the truth comes out. But I think it's time everyone here learned the real story, the one about you and my mother." Douglas's expression flickered, just for a second, but long enough for those paying attention to notice. "I don't know what you're talking about." 28 years ago, Nicholas continued, pulling out his phone and connecting it to the presentation system, "my mother had an affair with you. She got pregnant, and when my father, the man who raised me despite the DNA, discovered the truth, you had her killed."
The new photographs appeared on the screen, the ones Logan had uncovered, showing Douglas and Nicholas's mother, showing the timeline, showing the business relationship that turned deadly. The ballroom fell silent, all attention now riveted on the unfolding drama. "That's absurd," Douglas blustered, but his face had gone pale. "This is a desperate man making wild accusations." "Mr. Logan Pierce," Nicholas called, and the journalist stepped forward from the crowd. "Would you like to share what you found in Douglas Reed's financial records?" Logan took the stage, tablet in hand. "I've been investigating Mr. Reed for the past week," he said clearly. "I have documented evidence of bribery, money laundering, and multiple connections to organized crime, including payments made to Romano family members for contract killings, including the accident that killed Nicholas Romano's mother in 1997.
The screen filled with financial records, bank transfers, communications that painted a picture of corruption so extensive it made the audience gasp. "You can't prove any of this," Douglas said, but his voice was shaking now. "These are forgeries, manipulations." "They're time-stamped, authenticated records," Logan said firmly, "and they're already in the hands of federal prosecutors. You're finished, Mr. Reed." Douglas's mask finally cracked, the benevolent benefactor disappearing to reveal the ruthless manipulator beneath. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled at Nicholas. "You're still a killer, still my bastard son who's done every terrible thing I needed him to do. You're no better than me, boy. We're the same." "No," Nicholas said quietly. "We're not, because I'm choosing to stop, to face what I've done and try to be better. You're still hiding behind respectability while destroying everyone around you." Douglas laughed bitterly. "And what do you think happens now? You think you expose me and walk away clean? You think this ends happily?" He turned to Violet, his expression vicious. "You think loving him makes you noble? You're a fool. He'll destroy you eventually, just like he destroys everything he touches." Violet stepped forward, her voice clear and strong despite her shaking hands. "He already has destroyed me," she said. "The person I was before I met Nicholas, the safe, sheltered nun who thought she understood faith, that person is gone, and I'm grateful. Because real faith isn't about hiding from the world's darkness. It's about stepping into it and choosing light anyway." She moved to stand beside Nicholas, taking his hand in front of 200 witnesses. "I love him," she said simply, "not despite who he is, but because of who he's trying to become. And if that scandalizes you, if that destroys my reputation, if that makes me unfit for the church, then so be it. Some things are worth the cost." Mother Superior Evelyn stood, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Douglas Reed, you are no longer welcome at St. Catherine's. Your donations are returned as of this moment. And, Sister Violet," she paused, her expression complex, "you've chosen a difficult path, but perhaps it's the path you were always meant to walk." Police sirens wailed outside. Federal agents were already entering the ballroom, moving toward Douglas with practiced efficiency. Logan's evidence had been devastating, and the wheels of justice were finally turning. Douglas looked at Nicholas one last time, and something in his expression shifted from rage to something almost like grief. "She was beautiful," he said quietly. "Your mother, I loved her. And when she chose your father over me, when she said that baby would be raised as a Romano no matter what the DNA said, it destroyed me. Everything I've done since, every terrible choice, it all started with losing her." "That doesn't make it right," Nicholas said, but his voice was gentler than it should have been. "You don't get to use love as an excuse for destruction." "No," Douglas agreed as the agents reached him. "But neither do you, son. Remember that." Then he was taken away, and Violet felt Nicholas sag slightly against her,
the adrenaline finally fading to leave only exhaustion and complicated grief. The crowd erupted again, some people applauding the dramatic reversal, others scandalized by the revelations, most simply shocked by everything they'd witnessed. Violet ignored them all, focusing only on the man beside her whose world had just been torn apart and rebuilt in the space of 20 minutes. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "No," Nicholas said honestly, "but I will be, eventually." They left the Dala together, walking through the chaos hand in hand, no longer hiding, no longer running. Behind them, the wreckage of their old lives smoldered. Ahead of them, the future remained uncertain, complicated, potentially dangerous. But they would face it together. 3 months later, Violet stood in the transformed community center, watching Nicholas teach a job skills class to former gang members. He was patient, encouraging, using his own story as proof that change was possible, even when everything seemed lost. The aftermath of the gala had been brutal. Nicholas had spent 2 weeks in police custody while prosecutors sorted through his immunity deals, eventually releasing him with strict probation conditions. Nathan Romano had disappeared, whether into hiding or worse, no one knew. The Romano family empire had collapsed, leaving a power vacuum that Chicago was still adjusting to. Douglas Reed awaited trial on multiple charges. His lawyers were good, but Logan's evidence was better. The man who'd manipulated so many lives would finally face consequences. And Violet had officially been released from her vows. Some people praised her honesty, others condemned her choice. The Catholic Church issued carefully worded statements about forgiveness and new paths, neither fully condemning nor endorsing her decision. "Are you ready?" Nicholas asked, finishing his class and moving to her side. "Always," Violet said, taking his hand. They'd started the foundation, a real one this time, with full transparency and legitimate funding. People trying to escape gang life, women fleeing abusive situations, anyone who needed a second chance found refuge here. The work was hard, the funding uncertain, the results sometimes heartbreaking. But it mattered. That's what kept them going. Sister Cecilia visited regularly, still in her habit, still dedicated to her calling, but supportive of Violet's different path. Mother Superior Evelyn had written several times, her letters growing warmer with each one, as if she was learning to see redemption in unexpected places. Lucy called weekly, delighting in her sister's dramatic life choices and offering running commentary on Violet's epic romance that puts every book I've ever read to shame. And Nicholas was healing, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. He'd started therapy, started processing his complicated feelings about Douglas Reed, started learning to forgive himself for the person he'd been forced to become. "I never said thank you," Nicholas said one evening as they sat in the community center after everyone else had gone home, "for standing beside me at the gala, for not walking away when you had every reason to." "You don't need to thank me," Violet said, leaning against him. "We saved each other, remember? You showed me what real faith looks like. I showed you what real redemption requires. We're even." "I'm still a disaster," Nicholas warned, only half joking. "Still have nightmares, still struggle with the person I used to be, still not sure I deserve any of this." "Good," Violet said firmly. "The day you stop questioning whether you deserve redemption is the day you stop pursuing it. Doubt keeps you humble, humility keeps you human, and human is exactly what you're supposed to be." Nicholas pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Marry me," he said quietly. "What?" "Marry me," Nicholas repeated, "not because I think I deserve you, I know I don't, but because I love you, because I want to spend whatever time I have left proving that love can transform even the most broken people. Because," his voice cracked, "because you're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I don't want to waste another day not being yours completely." Violet felt tears stream down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it, to loving you, to building this life together, to proving that redemption is real and love is stronger than any past." They sat there in the empty community center, holding each other, two people who'd been broken by their pasts, finally finding wholeness in each other's arms. It wasn't a perfect ending. Nicholas would always carry scars from his years as Nicholas Romano, enforcer and killer. Violet would always question whether she'd made the right choice, whether leaving her vows was betrayal or breakthrough. But they would carry those questions together, face those scars together, build something beautiful out of the ruins of their former lives. Because that's what redemption actually looks like. Not a fairy tale transformation, but a daily choice to keep trying, keep believing, keep loving even when it's terrifying. And sometimes, the most sacred thing you can do is see someone's potential instead of their past, and love them fiercely enough to help them become who they were always meant to be. Not perfect, not sinless, not beyond reproach, just beautifully, messily, courageously human, and absolutely worth saving.